here we go again. We come on the air this afternoon with breaking news again. In the last 15 minutes, we have learned that John Bolton, former national security advisor turned sharp critic of Donald Trump, is expected to be the subject of a complaint or even an indictment as early as next week. MSNBC, citing two sources, is reporting exclusively that the acting U.S. attorney in Maryland is moving forward quickly to seek criminal charges against Bolton. They reportedly relate to claims that he improperly kept classified national security information in his Maryland home. His home was searched in August. Bolton's lawyer insists that his client, John Bolton, did nothing improper. It is the second instance of targeting a prominent Trump critic in 2 days, and the third in the past 2 weeks. It certainly fuels the perception that Donald Trump is deliberately making his way down a to-do list having to do with his promise of political retribution. It is where we begin today with former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer. She was fired by Trump's Justice Department in March. Also joining us, former Assistant Special Agent in charge at the FBI, MSNBC National Security and Intelligence Analyst Michael Feinberg. He's also a fellow at Lawfare. Also joining us, NYU law professor, MSNBC legal analyst Melissa Murray. And with me at the table, investigative reporter for the New York Times, Mike Schmidt is here. Michael Feinberg, I want to start with you because I think there will be a reflexive instinct to dive immediately into the facts, which is an important part of anything that all of us do. But I do think that the forest is perhaps more newsworthy at the moment. This is the third stated enemy of Donald Trump indicted in less than 2 weeks. There is clearly direction, and because Donald Trump mistakenly posted it on social media instead of in the DM where he planned to send it, according to reporting in the Wall Street Journal, that he wanted, quote, Pam to move quickly with his targeted enemies.
Yeah, that's very true. And I've heard from a couple of different sources that with respect to the Letitia James indictment, that the acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia did not even notify the Maine Justice Department that she was doing it this week. They were expecting it to happen next week. So that sort of at least implies she was communicating or taking orders from somebody other than her direct chain of command at DOJ. The alacrity with which the Bolton complaint or indictment is moving forward is also a little bit alarming, because normally in a case involving the mishandling of classified information, you have to do something called an original classification authority determination, where you take the supposedly classified information, you send it to the owning agency, and they make a determination about whether it is in fact classified. That is a process that usually takes months, and it is something beyond the control and outside of the Department of Justice's chain of command. So I don't see how they could have gotten that OCA classification without direct intervention from the White House ordering the other agencies to speed up the usual process.
That's a fascinating thing that certainly at least someone like yourself would be able to flag for us. I want to ask you about John Bolton's sort of arc as a national security figure. I worked in the Bush administration. He was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, politically a polarizing figure in both parties. He became a sharp critic of Donald Trump's, and that might be the most familiar that many of my viewers are with him. But in the middle, there was an effort by Bill Barr to prosecute him or to stop the publication of a book. And one of the things he wrote about in his book, called The Room Where It Happens, was the issue over which Donald Trump is indicted the first time, the pressure campaign against Zelensky. Just talk about his profile as someone who has this long story going back to Bill Barr of political retribution and malicious prosecution, if that's an argument his lawyers choose to make.
Yeah, well, I mean, John Bolton has had a very long and journeyed path within conservative foreign policy circles, starting out as some sort of a mid-period neoconservative in the Bush administration to his role in the Trump administration, where reportedly he often got into disagreements over the sort of America first isolationist posture that administration often took. And so he wrote his book, The Room Where It Happened, as a direct criticism of that point of view. And it was incredibly uncomplimentary to the president and many of his supporters. So, Bill Barr and the then DOJ began an investigation into whether he had inadvertently or purposely released classified information. And one of the things that came out during that tumult was that he had submitted the book to pre-publication review, as former government officials are required to do. And they approved it, but then that approval was somehow overruled by a different figure in the chain of command, and he was asked to resubmit it, and he resubmitted it and never got a response, supposedly, to the second submission. And ultimately, he and his publishers decided to release the book. And so Bill Barr launched an investigation. The investigation never really went anywhere, in that after the change in administrations, Merrick Garland and his Justice Department, who, it should be very clear, are not natural allies of John Bolton, determined that there had been no wrongdoing and this was not a charge worth pursuing. But I should hasten to add, we don't know for certain. In fact, we've heard reporting to the contrary, that these new charges have anything to do with the publication of that book.
And we'll dive into what we do know on the fact pattern of what he's expected to be indicted for next week. I see some of the instinct to separate this case out, and that will be important at one level. But the way that it's the same sounds to me like, as with Jim Comey, Bill Barr looked at Bolton and tried to prosecute him, and ultimately that case doesn't go as far as Trump wanted it to. And this Justice Department seems to be barreling full speed ahead. Mike Schmidt, this is a chapter you've written about and reported on extensively. Your thoughts?
The reason that we're having this conversation is that presidents are told in normal times, and Donald Trump was told this during his first term, that they should not talk about criminal investigations. They shouldn't talk about who should be criminally investigated and who committed criminality. Because if they do that, it creates a perception that the prosecution is being done at the behest of the president. And it raises the question, is this being done for political reasons, or is this being done based on the law and the fact? Obviously, Donald Trump has not kept his mouth shut about John Bolton. So because of that, we cannot sit here as people trying to understand this moment and accept on the face of it that this is being done based on the law and the fact, because the most powerful person in the United States, who has picked not only who his attorney general is, but it looks like picks, who his line prosecutors are on prosecutions, has been so open about this. And during his first term, aides and lawyers told him time and time again, don't talk about this, because when they really do get one of your enemies, it could potentially undermine it. So if he is charged and it does move forward, we will see, first of all, we'll get a sense of what the evidence is, and we will also see what is a question that has emerged in the Comey case, and I'm sure will emerge in the James case and will emerge in the Bolton case, which is, where is the line on vindictive prosecution? So a lot of people that get indicted go to court and they try and file motions and they say, I'm being unfairly prosecuted and I'm being persecuted for that. And those things usually fall flat. They usually do not get ruled on in their favor. We now have people that the President of the United States has openly said, I want prosecuted, and it looks like they are being prosecuted. And there's not a lot of case law on this. This is not something that we see play out a lot. So we are going to see what vindictive prosecution means in 2025 in the United States. Is that something that would stop a criminal prosecution, or is it something that it doesn't matter to the courts?